Good afternoon, dear participants. My name is Nicholas Ouma from the African Union Commission, and I will be moderating this session. With this session, we are opening a new topic never covered before at WorldSkills Conference, Skills Development in Fragile Economies. Roughly 2 billion people live in countries experiencing situations of fragility and armed violence, and another 200 million people are affected by the slow or sudden onset of disasters. Conflict and disasters have direct and long-standing impacts on the world of work and on education and training pathways, causing lack of skills. Amidst crisis, education's transformative power becomes even more evident, offering protection, hope, and a pathway to brighter futures. In situations of protracted conflict, skills may be at very low levels because no training might have taken place in the past years with only limited economic activity. We do know that skills change worlds, and we had this from the morning's session and also at yesterday's opening session. And so this session is aimed at better understanding what are the characteristics of fragile settings and the potential of TVET to fostering stability, economic growth, and social cohesion. Skills development is also vital in resolving many of the drivers of conflict and to establish sustainable livelihoods. Support to the private sector is thus essential to facilitate inclusive recovery from disrupted education systems, limited employment opportunities, and weakened institutional capacities. Now, to help us unpack these issues, join me in welcoming the panelists for this session. We have on my immediate left, Roxane Ziguet, Fragility and Conflict Advisor from the French Development Agency. We have Hector Bombiella, National PISA, Vocational Education and Training and WorldSkills Coordinator and Advisor to the Director. And then we have Honorable Minister Muferihat Kamil, Minister of Labor and Skills Development from Ethiopia. We have next Christine Hofmann, Team Lead Skills for Social Inclusion from the ILO, and Fabio Jiménez, Head of Labor Mobility and Markets Unit, Labor Mobility Division at the International Organization for Migration. Before we start the discussion, we are looking at different buckets of fragility. And to Roxane, before we start the discussion, can you tell us in one sentence what makes an economy a fragile economy? What are the characteristics of fragile states, especially also in regards to skills development? To each one of you, just in one brief sentence. Yes, yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. There are several characteristics, I think. Conflict is one. Also the vulnerability to crisis in general. They may be climate crisis.
Proceed.
And then there are these contexts raise several issues. There may be displacement issues. There may be particular vulnerability for women and therefore more acute gender issues. And therefore there is a wide variety of vulnerabilities and of factors to take into account when designing interventions including skills interventions in these contexts.
Hector,
Thank you.
same question. What, in one sentence, what makes a
One
country?
sentence.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Okay, it's gonna be easy. Thank you very much. Fragile state in one sentence. Fragile economies. Well, if it's just one sentence, I would
No,
like
please.
to
go ahead,
say
yeah.
is who gets to define what's fragile? Who gets to label or to name that an economy or a country, it's or a democracy is fragile? And then we can start like talking about the impact of having a fragile economy and the rush to install or reinstall or recovery or rebuild, which would take will run off when we would like to talk about quality and excellence in skills development. So that would be a
Speak on the
fragile economy,
Yes.
like this. That would be an approach to fragile economy, the impact on skills quality and excellence, and precisely what we are doing here in this venue and this competition that we're talking about excellence and quality in skills development. Fragile economy, they have a long way to go in order to start thinking about quality and excellence when they're thinking about recovering, rebuilding, and essentially in coverage and get most of the population back into the educational or the training system.
Yes, Honorable Minister. Fragile economies, briefly as an introduction.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. As it is a new year in Ethiopia, I would like to say Happy New Year, as Ethiopia is the cradle of mankind. So I would like to take this opportunity to say Happy New Year to Ethiopians and to the world as well as part of the world.
Happy New Year.
Thank you so much. So as the instruction is in one word, to me, it is the capacity of the level of the resilience nature of the economy, or as it is put on the thematic area, the vulnerability of the economy explains more in one word, just to keep the instruction.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Yes. What defines this fragile economies, Christine?
Thank you, Nicholas. I would say individuals, for individuals, fragility means that their livelihoods are at threat because of conflict, natural disaster, climate change, as Roxanne already said. Enterprises see their assets threatened, their markets threatened, and communities and economies see their stability and their future threatened.
Threat to economies, threat to stabilities. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks, Nicholas. Thanks, Christine. Thank you very much. Nicholas, I would say that fragility is related to the capacity of a country to address the challenges they face. All countries face different types of challenges, sometimes at the same time, either internal challenges or external challenges. So the capacity to overcome those challenges is what defines the level of fragility of economy of a state.
Capacities to overcome challenges. Hector, you are the technical delegate assistant from WorldSkills Colombia and advisor to the Director General of National Learning Service, SENA, in Colombia. According to Human Rights Watch, the Colombian people face many problems which can be attributable to fragility, such as economic and social disruption, insecurity, limited access to justice, and of course, high levels of poverty that are resultant to this, especially among the indigenous peoples. Can you give us a general overview of what this means to the lives of young people and their access to education and skills development and training.
Thank you. Yeah, just to avoid the history lesson about what's been happening in Colombia for the last 200 years, I think it's worth to say that we have in place this leftist progressive government who is, well, led by the president Gustavo Petro. And it was we are out finally, or we are overcoming more than, generations where foreign powers, multinational corporations, all political or economics elites have decided the destiny or the policies, the public policy that we're supposed to implement in areas as social welfare or education, for example, not to mention others like peace policies or rights to victims and so on. So the challenge here of the Colombian government, the government of change, is to change the life of peasants, victims, migrants, displaced communities, displaced by conflict, internal conflict, or climate change, or extreme weather events, or global warming, you name it. The life of small landholders, artisanal fishers, indigenous and Black or African descendants, and also the popular economy. So this government looked to the cooperative unions or public popular associations and so on, which is the majority of population in my country. This all comes together in the National Development Plan. We'll start talking about policy. And from there, the national development plans of our countries, they have to be our countries, I said, of fragile economies, for example, they have to align with sustainable development goals. It's like, part of the situation, or the political decision to be able to insert ourselves in global circuits, not only of economic global system, but also social and other guarantees like human rights structures and so on. So with this political landscape, el SENA, which is the institution that I work for, which is the National Training Service, the largest in the country and the one that is training and certificating more than 70% of the young labor force in technical and technological abilities. So we have, we prepare hundreds, millions of students with thousands of instructors. We have a large representation here in WorldSkills as well. And we are spread out throughout all the territory with a large infrastructure, etc. So this is the institution that you look for when you talk about TVET. But the important thing, the relevant thing here is how we put together the National Development Plan with the mission and the tradition of the National Training Service, a national institution. So in this articulation, in this effort to make sense these two things, we start developing internal policies and strategies to favor or to train, to access the poor, fragile, destitute, neglected, underprivileged, etc., youth population. So to the question of how skills impact the potential the potential future of the young population in Colombia, and why they are important, because it opens a lot of opportunities, not only in the labor market, in the economic sector, but I think the skills have the possibility to also open this young population eyes and mind and kind of situate themselves in this historical moment. And in Colombia, to finally see the national government is looking into this population and offering opportunities to engage in training and education, and from there with all the guarantees. So it's a comprehensive effort and in an interinstitutional strategy. So I will talk about more in the next question, but that's pretty much what we're doing at the moment.
Thank you very much, Hector. You've talked of aligning skills development to national development plans as a priority for the Colombian current government. Christine, I'll now turn to you. The ILO supported young people's technical and vocational training with the Prospects program in a number of African countries and also the Middle Eastern countries. Can you give us an overview of how this project works, the Prospects project?
Thank you, Nicholas, with pleasure. So the ILO partners with the UNHCR, so the High Commissioner for Refugees, UNICEF, the World Bank, and IFC, so 5 organizations under this big partnership, which is funded by the Dutch government. And it's a unique partnership that tries to act in the humanitarian development nexus, that's a term that's very often used, to support forcibly displaced populations and host communities in moving out of the humanitarian support that is usually given in the beginning. But we have so many protracted crises, as you said. So we need to invest in development of people. And this program, active in 8 countries, 5 African, 3 Middle Eastern, has 3 big pillars: education, jobs, and protection. And hence works as an integrated approach, which is very important. And it draws on the unique advantages and technical knowledge of those 5 partners and works very closely in all countries with the national governments, with local governments, with workers and employers. And in the education and jobs nexus, we work a lot on TVET, and we come up with many interesting, innovative, inclusive approaches that bring host communities and forcibly displaced together. And we brought the voice of one of our beneficiaries. So if we could listen to that beneficiary, that would be, I think, a nice contribution to this panel. The beneficiary joined a welding program in Kenya, in Garissa County, and she'll tell you all about her experience. Video up, please.
Many women call themselves Iron Lady, but I believe I'm the real Iron Lady because I deal with irons in welding and fabrication. My name is Zaitun Said Omar, a young welder from Garissa Vocational Training College. What motivated me to do welding course? First of all, my mom, she motivated me. Once I was done with the school, despite being an orphan or being raised by a single parent, my mom, she couldn't manage to take me to a university. Always she used to tell me that, go on, my daughter. Nothing is impossible. Everything is possible, and you can do it. I insisted to join a TVET institute so that I can acquire skills and assist myself maybe and my family in future. Each and every time I was going through my studies, my homework and everything. When it comes to the exam, always I become the top. And that's what makes me very happy, because being the only lady and being at the top wasn't easy at all. There's a lot of challenges. Being the only lady in men's field isn't easy at all. At the first time when I was starting my welding career, everyone was like, maybe, what are you busy doing? These work are not meant for you. Then you are just dirtifying your hands. In future, I would like to employ myself so that even I could employ the other generation coming, and to assure that maybe I employ the young women's and to give them courage that nothing is impossible. We can do in every field and feel satisfied in every field.
We've all heard the story of Zaitun, which is a story of resilience. I want to pick it from where Zaitun left and pick up on your reflections on this story of Zaitun. Just brief reflections. Yes? Okay, anyone? Yeah.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's really inspiring, and I think that's a really good example also of how it can be important to support crossing over. So women going to male-dominated sectors like welding, and it's also really interesting because it shows how skills can support individuals' trajectories. So at the individual level. Building their resilience, providing an income, a future income for them, but also contribute to a more lively economy.
Fabio, what's your reflections on this story of Zaitun?
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you. Not just to congratulate ILO and all the partners for fostering this interesting initiative. I think, as Roxanne was saying, it reflects very well the importance of skills development for countries in the need for a local workforce with the new skills. And if this skills development also comes with a gender approach, for example, that's also very valuable and very important.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, what is your initial reflections on this story of Zaitun?
Thank you so much. It's very interesting to see that skill makes a difference in the lives of many, especially who are in need of such kinds of support and intervention. Had it not been for her interest to join to the TVET institutes, it's not like going to universities, coming to TVETs. Needs to stand against all odds, especially when you are a woman. So she came across all those challenges, and at the end of the day, and what she says is she wants to employ herself in the sector. It's all about empowering a person through skill. So I would like to congratulate also ILO for taking such initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Hector? Yes.
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, this is great. I think it's a call for all actors involved in each of the skills. It's an inspiring process as well. Probably she had a very encouraging instructor behind, an encouraging family. But it's also, we have similar examples, I guess, all over fragile economies and states and democracies where women are having the conversation of start working or start participating in these sectors, male-dominated. But for example, maybe if they are in welding or bricklaying, for example, the hammer is too heavy and they are not able to take it. And examples like that are all over the place. So if the industry is not involved in, creating conditions for women to participate, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be as open as we would like to see women in every skills.
Thank you, Hector, and thank you, Christine and the ILO for sharing this. And as a follow-up, Christine, what do you consider as fragile settings, and how can TVET systems in general, as well as other forms of skills training, best support recovery and cohesion?
Thanks for the question. Maybe let me start by adding my view on on the video as well, because to me it's a wonderful example how skills give hope in fragile contexts. And they give hope not only to Zaytoun here, herself, but to her family, her community, all her surrounding. And this is one of the messages I think we need to give and to elevate in order to move TVET up the global agenda. That in fragile contexts, skills give hope. And they give hope when we have a couple of conditions as well. When they manage to bring people together as well from conflicting groups, when they create learning environments that foster social cohesion as well, where TVET can be considered as a peace hub. And I was very happy to see in the draft of the African Union TVET strategy, peace is one of the goals mentioned in there as well. So skills can give hope and they can bring peace. Also, in fragile settings, they give hope when people learn while they earn. So because livelihoods are under threat, people cannot simply spend many months in a training center and learn. They need to earn while they learn, and hence work-based learning. Employment programs that rebuild infrastructure and people learn while they do the work. Apprenticeships are very strong approaches, instruments in fragile settings. And as you might have heard this morning, there is a new international recommendation on quality apprenticeships that also makes a reference to how apprenticeships can help transitions to formality. And so in Africa, in fragile contexts, we have a lot of apprenticeships in the informal economy. So also within prospects, we have a very nice example of how informal apprenticeships can be improved and their quality improved so that people get hope and get better jobs. And the third condition is, and that's also very important in fragile contexts, that the opportunities are actually linked, that the skilling opportunities are linked to labor market access and labor market opportunities, because this is not always the case, and we don't want to frustrate people. So now to get to the second part of your question, Nicholas. So what TVET systems need to do, because one, that's the individual level, but TVET systems need to become resilient against crisis. And how can that happen? They need to be agile and flexible and reactive. They need to foster innovation. We've seen during the COVID crisis, there's been also a multi-agency initiative to ask countries to assess how TVET systems have been able to react. And many, many systems did not manage. They simply closed down. So they were not well prepared. They were not resilient enough for that crisis. So it's very important as well that TVET systems combine formal and non-formal approaches as well. That they decentralize decision power so that the local players can take decisions. That multiple pathways are facilitated. Recognition of prior learning could also be one of the elements. Then, as I already mentioned, TVET systems are resilient when they're inclusive, when they do not exclude, but when they bring people together in law and in practice. And that requires trainers that are well trained, that are aware of the vulnerabilities of people, etc. And last but not least, TVET systems are resilient when they are based on social dialogue, when they're based on an active and ongoing exchange with the actors of the labor market, which are the employers and the workers, but also other players of the local skills ecosystem. I stop here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Christine, for those reflections on TVET, particularly on the issue of resilience and the fact that TVET gives hope, skills gives hope to young people in fragile communities, fragile economies, and fragile settings. Now let's move on to other speakers to dive into country specifics and solutions. And I will start with Honorable Minister Muferihat Kamil. Minister, what is the context in Ethiopia? Could you let us know where and how skills development policies and initiatives are being implemented to restore hope, to restore cohesion in the country, giving the Ethiopian experience?
Thank you so much, Nicholas. I think I would like to see the role of TVET in building resilience for the economy and for the country, as well as cohesion in terms of democracy, as Ethiopia is transiting to democracy, as you are coming from Addis. You are a very good witness regarding Ethiopia. Just to give you a few background about it, as it is asked to reflect on a specific country experience. And I can say that for the last 5-6 years, Ethiopia has registered a growth with an average of 7.1 continuously. And Ethiopia has planned to be a beacon of prosperity in the context of Africa. Its main focus is its human capital. The continent in general has that demographic dividend. Ethiopia, as part of Africa, has tried to see the opportunity Ethiopia has in terms of human resource. So the labor market is expected to create 2 million jobs annually, but the government has given a huge emphasis to continue for its growth and development. Skill has given a huge emphasis so that my ministry, it is a small baby, 3 years old, but growing well and very well, so that there is a dedicated ministerial institution set up for skill to get nurtured, because we are creating a skill-led quality job annually, though the demand, the target set in the 10 years plan is 2 million. We have registered more than 3.5 million quality jobs annually, which is mainly, it's not about only creating jobs, but skill-led jobs are the major emphasis of the plan. So it's not only giving hope for the youth, but it's about creating wealth as well. Through this quality jobs, it's about creating wealth, mainly anchoring on giving emphasis on innovation. So the TVET centers or TVET sector as a sector has become a space for incubating talents. This is one of the major strategy taken for the TVET sector, so as to create wealth. Innovation is at the heart of it. And few days ago, there were innovators who came through this process and who get graduated to the level where they were, and they're promoted as startups. So the TVET sector has played an instrumental role for the economy to have a very strong foundation. In Ethiopia, we have more than 1,800 TVET facilities. As you know, we went through lots of ups and downs at the world, including the pandemic. And apart from that, there were man-made as well as natural problems and challenges. So we try to focus on, giving the skill development program, not only for those who are in school and in universities, but we focused on both the informal training for the TV sector, so that we try to reach out our farmers so as to create that resilience. And while facing all those challenges, the economy is continuing growing. So we are seeing that the TV sector has its own contribution. In terms of cohesion, when we mean peace, peace is not only about the absence or presence of war. There are so many structural problems to be addressed in terms of peace. So in addressing those structural problems, for instance, ensuring equity has to be there. So to ensure equity, we have to address factors that instigate inequality. So if we could empower individuals or groups through skill, it will create a conducive environment for positive peace, so that there will be an improvement in vertical as well as horizontal cohesiveness. So skill plays its own role in terms of ensuring cohesion as well, through addressing those structural problems that will instigate so many problems. Those problems will contribute to, occurrence of violence or what have you. And this is how we're trying to address those structural issues, as well as this is how we are trying to tap the potential we have in the country in terms of human capital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for sharing that development trajectory of Ethiopia anchored on skills development, and also particularly mentioning and being forthright about some of these structural problems, including equity and the need for conducive environment to address the issues related to peace. If we move on to Fabio, migration, and the Honorable Minister has alluded to this, migration, displacement of people are some of these consequences of fragility. And often host countries are also in states of fragility, despite also being hosts. How can host countries help continue to have opportunities for livelihoods? And what are the processes of skills recognition where people are forced to migrate?
Nicholas, thank you for that question. And let me begin, for those who are new to IOM, to briefly mention that IOM is the International Organization for Migration. We are part of the United Nations system as the leading intergovernmental organization promoting since 1951 safe and orderly migration for the benefit of all. We have 175 member states and about 30,000 staff around the world, 90% of them in the field, in working with governments, working with counterparts. And I'm going to also begin my answer making a clarification between international migration and displacement or forced migration. In the broad picture, international migration has remained stable over the last decade. There are about 281 million international migrants, which represents basically 3.6% of the total world population. Most of this international migration takes place in a regular and orderly manner. Forced migration or displacement is a very particular and different phenomenon. There are about 117 million people living in displacement globally at the end of 2022. And this includes refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced persons, and other people on the move. In addition to this, some scientists predict that by 2050, there will be around 216 million people forced to move across their own countries because of environmental and climate change related issues. Against this backdrop, migrants, refugees, and internally displaced people continue to face different obstacles to get opportunities for skills development and skills recognition. And let me give you a couple of facts just to illustrate this. According to IOM research on migration governance indicators, migrants are guaranteed equal access to education services, including technical and vocational training, regardless of their migration status, only in 40% of the countries. So there are 60% of the countries globally that facilitate access to education considering migration status for people on the move. Another important fact is that only half of the countries that we have assessed with migration governance indicators participate in international qualification frameworks. So on one hand, you have an important number of people on the move, an increasing number of internally displaced people and forced migration. And on the other hand, you continue to have very limited opportunities, or as we call them in IOM, regular mobility pathways for education, for work, or for protection purposes. To address this important issue, we promote and we advocate for different mechanisms and procedures to facilitate skills recognition. And this is probably one of my main messages today. There is not only one single mechanism or procedure to facilitate skills recognition. There are multiple ways of doing this. For example, some regional economic communities in Africa have established regional common qualification frameworks. The Southern Africa Developing Community, for example, is one example of these qualification frameworks established at the regional level. We also have mutual recognition agreements between states, between governments participating in regional integration processes. The CARICOM in the Caribbean is one example of these. We also have skills passports. Some countries or even some sectors within countries use skills passports to make visible and to translate the skills of a given person according to a particular qualification framework. We have, for example, the UNESCO qualification passport that facilitate or help migrants, refugees, particularly refugees and asylum seekers to get their skills recognized for education purposes, to continue, for example, learning languages or getting access to a master's degree in another country. And I'm going to emphasize the role of prior recognition of prior learning. Christine mentioned this briefly in her previous intervention. The recognition of prior learning is very important. I will say this, Nicolas and colleagues, for people on the move, because these facilitate people who doesn't necessarily have formal education, for example, or documents that prove that they have this formal education, to get a qualification that allow them to either continue their education or to get a job opportunity, for example. So prior learning recognition is probably one of the most important tools for people on the move to facilitate this. We are promoting these tools and others, and as you rightly said, Nicholas, helping different type of governments and economies to agree on these mechanisms by promoting skills mobility partnerships. Two examples of this model. We have a program in Thailand that is helping workers from Cambodia, from the Laos Republic, and also from Myanmar to work in Thailand in the hospitality sector. I think we have some pictures that illustrate this work in Thailand. And we are also working with other organizations in the MENA region, in the Middle Eastern countries, to promote skills development and skills recognition in the construction sector, in Tunisia particularly, to come to Italy and work in Italy and Tunisia, and in Morocco in the mechatronics sector to work both in Morocco and Italy under this program. The idea behind the SMP model is that we need to foster skills development and skills recognition in countries of origin. So once they receive this opportunity, they can come, or part of these people can come to countries of destination and get better job opportunities. I can explain later, Nicholas, how this model works. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Fabio, for sharing those examples of instruments in place to facilitate skills recognition, and also, most importantly, the skills mobility partnerships that IOM is part of. Now coming to Roxanne and the Agency for French Development Agency, you are interveners in this ecosystem, and skills interventions are essential to increase people's resilience, especially in crisis contexts. How effective are these policies in conflict or crisis situations that the French Development Agency has been part of?
Thank you, Nicholas. So conflicts tend to last longer than before. They tend to last on average 30 years today. It was twice shorter 30 years ago. And they have massive impacts on economies, on people's resilience, on institutions' resilience, on education systems. And therefore, they have long-lasting effects on development pathways through their impacts on human capital. Therefore, it's essential to support skills interventions before, during, and after a conflict. And the French Development Agency does that by working along these 3 stages, before, during, and after the conflict. But first, maybe a small detour to explain what the French Development Agency is. So we're a public institution that finances and supports the transition to a more sustainable world and the transition to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In practical terms, we do that by providing loans, grants, expertise, technical assistance to governments, to local authorities, to companies, to NGOs, to foundations. And we do that across a variety of sectors, including energy, biodiversity, climate, health, education, and some others, but education is the one that we're interested in today. So that being said, we work at 2 levels in order to support skills interventions before, during, and after conflict. The first level is an individual level in order to ensure access to trainings to individuals. The second level is at the ecosystem level to strengthen the ecosystem and to support the ecosystem in building its resilience and being able to deliver these trainings and to cope with a crisis or with a conflict when they occur, so to be resilient in the face of these shocks. There are several points that we think are very important across these 2 levels. At the first level, at the individual level, when working in conflict settings, it's very important to target the most vulnerable and they are often the furthest away from accessing these trainings. So it's important to have specific tools in order to identify them and to target them and to allow them to participate in the trainings. It's also important to design as much as possible multi-sectoral interventions that are not only going to be providing technical skills, but that will, for instance, embark some foundational education, some literacy training, some soft skills trainings. It's also important to support this path from training to labor market opportunities. That is with employment support services, for instance, but it can also be support to those who want to be self-employed with grants or with entrepreneurship trainings, without forgetting to also help those who do not want to go into self-employment, because a large majority of the youth after training goes to self-employment, and it's also important to support those who want to go to employment to do so. Another very important point is having an eye for gender, and making sure that trainings are truly inclusive, and designing specific measures so that they are truly inclusive. And in some of the projects that we fund, for instance, implement our partners who implement the projects include some childcare activities in order to allow mothers and to allow women and girls with care duties to participate effectively in these trainings. In some other projects, we fund some other projects that will include, for instance, gender training modules, or specific designs to make sure that women who face sexual violence or sexist discrimination have referral ways and have redress mechanisms. And finally, and it was mentioned by Christine and by our colleague from ILO as well, from the IOM, sorry. It's the potential of these skills interventions to build social cohesion, and to build vertical social cohesion, but also horizontal social cohesion. And for instance, there are a lot of programs that are going to be targeting internally displaced people or refugee people. And by making sure that you also include the host community in these systems, you can at least make sure that you're not increasing the tensions between the communities, and possibly maybe even building the cohesion between the communities. At the ecosystem level, there are also several points to consider. The first one is, and this was also mentioned by the distinguished panel on my left. You mentioned the skill recognition and recognizing prior learning, as well as recognizing skills that were acquired in the informal sector. So this is very important because in the context we're talking about, a lot of these skills are actually acquired in the informal sector, and therefore it's important that public authorities can also recognize these skills. We also try to promote multisectoriality in programs, as well as dialogue. This was also one point that was mentioned by my colleagues. The national dialogue, but also the local dialogue and the dialogue with the private sector. And for instance, we need to make sure that the skills that are provided in the programs and in the centers are what the private sector needs and are leading to inclusion into the labor market after the training is over. And then finally, an important point is to support existing structures that may be community training centers, that may be private training centers, but also some structures that support entrepreneurship. So there are wide number of things to consider when designing these programs, and I've mentioned a few of the most important ones according to us.
Thank you, Roxanne. You've mentioned a very important thing, and that is the intervention at two levels, at the individual level and ecosystem level, and the importance of dialogue. The big question is normally who is in charge. In some cases, in the absence of structured system that you alluded to, skills development is carried by organizations such as yours and NGOs. Does the French Development Agency have an experience in this guidance, especially in the absence or in cases where there is no government interlocutor?
So we never work alone in the context where we operate. We always work in dialogue with the public authorities at the central level and at the local level. But you're absolutely right that there are some specificities in conflict-affected settings. These include possibly more difficult access. These include possibly risks on people and on equipment and on infrastructure, security risks, for instance. And these also include sometimes lower capacity with the traditional actors that we work with. And finally, these contexts are also characterized by the fact that often there are lots of NGOs working in them. Humanitarian NGOs, but also development NGOs, and these NGOs also working at the nexus that was mentioned, this humanitarian development nexus. And so we do also work with these NGOs, always in dialogue with the public authorities to make sure that the projects are relevant, but also that we do not undermine the credibility of authorities in delivering essential services. And there are some specificities when we work with these NGOs. We try to support having a sectorial dialogue. We also try to leverage some of the added value that these NGOs have. And very often they're very experienced in targeting the most vulnerable. So that's something that we can leverage to try and include these most vulnerable people in our programs, in the programs that we fund. They're also often more experienced with working across multi-sectorial activities, which is sometimes more difficult when you are talking to one minister, that is a minister in one dedicated sector. And then finally, working with NGOs allows us to work with the local civil society organizations. And we have a fund, for instance, called the Support Fund for Feminist Organizations that is dedicated to funding local civil society organizations involved in gender equality and inclusion of women into the labor markets and women's empowerment. And through this scheme, we can finance very local civil society organizations that have very good knowledge of the populations they work with, the territories they work with. So that's also very important for us. And then we try as much as possible also to build capacity across the spectrum. So working with training centers, working with employment services, working with youth centers that are very often going to be the ones actually identifying the participants in the trainings.
Thank you. And it's important you mentioned the issue of a multi-stakeholder approach that is very, very important. And another angle to this, and coming to the situation in Colombia, is the link between skills development policies and social protections. So how do you take actions that are inclusive and leave no one behind? Very, very briefly. 3 minutes.
Could you define briefly?
Yeah.
I will take a couple minutes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, actually, this is the opportunity to talk about a very specific program we are implementing that is closely associated for what we are talking about. Colombia, it's a rural country. It's a peasant country. And we forget about that decades and generations ago. We thought we were an industrial and then like half industrial or a service country, and we are not. We are an agrarian country or an agrarian democracy. And so the base, what's the social group that is in the baseline of these demographics that we are rediscovering are the peasant groups. Smallholders, landless peasant, rural population. I'm not going to get into the definition of what a peasant is or what is not. But how you connect this, how do you turn or redirect all the resources of a national government or the institution that trains young people in Colombia, which is the National Training Service, SENA, how you do the transition to stop looking or start looking at the peasant population. If the peasant population has not been properly attended, or the training programs or the training offer has not been completely pertinent or crafted according to the conditions of the territory. This is a different historical time from 20 years or 50 years ago. And so the name of the strategy is Campesena. You know, it's like combining these two words. El SENA is the institution and the campesinos. And the idea is to put the peasant population in the center of the offer of the National Training Service. And how do we do it? So we have like kind of three main drivers. The first one is to acknowledge that this is a population that needs to be looked at, that needs to re-dignify. We need to acknowledge that we need to recognize that they are part of our national identity. Acknowledge as well that there are associative or collective processes or social movements already going on within these social groups, and we don't want to co-opt them or start having them to start in training programs or, for example, entrepreneurial schemes that are not going to work. So we need to look at what is when we talk about skills for the peasants, what are those skills that we need to encourage, that we need to identify, or we need to discover? And we need to learn from there, because as my colleague Fabio mentioned, there are previous learnings, not only in the case of migrant or displaced population that they bring with them, but also the population and the social groups that are been working the land and producing food for generations. They already have a set of skills in place.
Thank you.
Which are those? And so I guess that's the question we should ask, if these skills are pertinent to being offered to these social groups. So Campesena, this initiative, is looking to ask the peasants through their associations that they already have in place, what are those needs, and combine them with all the know-how and all the infrastructure that we already have in our training centers. So we have to adjust the offer. And this is a call also for the industry to adjust what we are talking. When we talk about WorldSkills, what are we talking about? What's the target population we would like to address? What's the target sector or the industry? Are we looking at the right horizon? This is also a prospective work that I'm trying to suggest here. And we also need to see that the labor market is transforming. And which are those parts of the labor market that we need to strengthen? So the connection between skills development and social protections, they are very clear. I mean, the more you acknowledge and recognize the previous learnings or the specific needs that are linked to the territory. For example, we talk about skills, peasant skills, and if those skills that we like to promote and we like to encourage and we like to bring to this kind of strategies or initiative globally as well, but those skills are not contributing to food sovereignty, those skills are not contributing or addressing or tackling issues of sustainability or protection of natural resources, then I think we need to restate and rework our whole idea of what are those skills that acknowledge the historical moment we are living through.
Thank you very much. Adjusting the offer and transforming the labor market. At this point, I want to take a few questions from the audience and reflections from the audience. So is there any, we have microphones within the audience. So if you have a reflection you want to put across, just by a show of hands, then we'll take the questions or reflections that you may have on the issue of fragility and skills development in fragile contexts. Any takers? Looking around. As you reflect on, I don't see any hand, but I want to come to the question I asked earlier, because I don't see any hand up. I asked a question earlier in terms of when there is no government interlocutor in areas and contexts of fragility. Roxanne mentioned what they do. If I may bring the question back to others who intervene, maybe Fabio, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Nicholas. I think it's just important to mention, at least in the case of IOM, we dedicate 2/3 of our budget to address issues in countries that face emergency and that need some support to recover from crisis, for example. So in those cases when there are no, stable interlocutors at the government level, what we, IOM, can do is to work together with other partners within the UN system to facilitate this communication on a more permanent manner. And I think we have a lot of experience in doing this in different contexts. And this is a valid, a legitimate way of supporting countries when they face, these challenges of a period of time, and they need to have or to develop, for example, a particular response to a crisis or a system. So this is something that we are very, experienced in doing so, but we do it together with other UN agencies and with the support of other countries also.
Christine, has ILO experience with intervening where the systems are totally non-existent?
Well, that's a very difficult question, but I'd like to, remind you all, we're a tripartite organization. So we don't only work with government, we work with workers and employers as well. And so they might be entry points as well in some countries. And picking up on Fabio's point, I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity because we're both on the panel and we have collaborated together for a long time now. We have a partnership together with UNESCO, IOM, ILO, and our two international social partners, so the International Organization of Employers and the International Trade Union Confederation, on a partnership, a global skills partnership on migration. And so we address a lot of different issues, including skills recognition. But we've also discussed issues of displacement and how skills can be a driver of development in fragile contexts, but among migrant populations and host communities. And so since there was no other question, the also AU TVET strategy mentions an AU skills passport as well. So that could definitely be one of the many elements that support people in displaced situations to develop hope again and be able to have skills that are portable.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, how does the skills development systems target the refugees particularly? I know Ethiopia hosts a lot of them in terms of government. and your reaction to the same question.
Thank you again. Ethiopia is currently hosting more than 1 million refugees, actually with open arm and heart as well. Following the hosting of refugees, again, Ethiopia has endorsed a new policy regarding refugees, I think, which is the very generous one in its kind. They have the full access to work, to banking system, and other related services apart from education and training. So there are so many specific country programs which we are collaborating with ILO as well as some other partners, including local initiatives as well. And actually the German Development Cooperation is also part of it. And there are different partners who are closely working with us.
Thank you.
So we are giving them several skill trainings and which enables them to work in the job market of Ethiopia.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's why I'm saying it's a very generous one.
Thank you for that generosity of the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. I see 2 hands up. I'll take the first question and then the second one behind there. So if I could have the microphones, roving microphones. There is micro behind you. Yes.
Hello, my name is Oliver. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
My name is Oliver from the German Ministry of Education and Research.
Go ahead.
I was very intrigued to listen to your comments. And now my question is, at the end of this, almost at the end of the panel, countries like Ethiopia and Colombia, they are in part rural, but in part they're developed. And I think this is, I see that there's, I would call them emerging economies, fragile in parts. We are interested to know when do you want to, and how would you design a handover from development aid to full-fledged VET systems? We have this big issue about excellence in vocational training. I haven't heard the word excellence in your panel. Is that something that you would strive for? And if, in what time frame you would envision this? I'm not part of the development aid institution, but I'm working on developing a VET system that is competitive and internationally integrated. Of course, we would like to have partners from Ethiopia and Colombia and all other parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. There was another hand there.
Hello?
Yes, proceed.
Yes, my name is Jay Maxis. I'm from Greece, and I'm founder of Odyssey organization, helping integrate refugees and migrants in the labor market in Greece. We serve more than 4,000 people every year, gain technical vocational skills into the labor market. My question is a little bit, zoomed out in the wider scale of things. It seems that there is a very practical narrative argument of why this is such a solution to a problem, right? Migration can really serve the talent gaps in Europe that is struggling with its productivity. That said, we are really losing the argument, and West is becoming more closed. We see that in Europe, we see that in the States. So we're clearly losing something in this very simple narration. And I want to see, looking forward in the future, how can we reverse this paradigm and help change these narrations that are very important and are becoming the biggest obstacle for the integration of vulnerable groups in the labor market of the West?
Thank you very much for those questions. I'll give the first one to, yes, because there was a reflection by Olivia on development aid and sustainability, and then the
Yes.
second question. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your question. Regarding Ethiopia, how we're seeing Ethiopia is, I was trying to mention earlier that Ethiopia has been registering a 7.1 annual average growth of the economy. This places Ethiopia not in the characterization of fragile economies, rather the economy which is resilient one, withstanding all natural as well as man-made disasters, including COVID, the pandemic. So currently there is a reform, a very comprehensive reform in Ethiopia, which is not focusing on only economy, though economy is one of the major reform areas, but there is a political reform in the country. There is institutional reform, and legal reform is also part of the reform process. So there's a very comprehensive and huge reform processes undergoing. So while conducting this comprehensive reform process, Ethiopia's economy is continuing registering 7.1 annual growth, and that makes Ethiopia one of the fastest growing economies in the world, not only in Africa. So this characterization sets the economy as a resilient economy. As you said, it's an emerging economy with diverse sectors. Actually, a majority of its population are in the agriculture sector, but currently we have diversified the source of growth of the economy. Agriculture is one of the major source of growth, but there's a manufacturing, mining, tourism, and ICT. As a latecomer, we have joined the digital sector, and we're moving very fast.
Thank you.
And so that makes it the economy which is seated in a very strong foundation. Regarding the second question, in our 10 years growth and development plan, we clearly articulated that we're aspiring prosperity. So our call to our development partners is not to give us, we're very grateful for that. When we were in need of it, they were there. And we're very grateful for that. But what we are calling our partners to join hands is not to support and the notion of aid, rather to help us in our journey towards this prosperity, growth, and development. Thank you so much.
Yes, as we are running out of time, very briefly.
Very, very briefly.
Yes.
I'll do my best.
Yes.
Well, Colombia is trying to solve their own problems, and we don't see international aid or foreign aid as a help, or aid itself is part of loan due compensations, which precisely will allow us, our countries, to grow together and to acknowledge each other, to see each other and our potentials, the differential potentials we have. So Germans, French, and Asians, they have their own potential. We can see it here in this venue.
Thank you.
And we have, and just 1 second, but foreign aid agenda might not have read properly the needs of our countries or the territories of the social groups they are trying to address, the needs of these social groups, and precisely that's why we need to do the job. We need to characterize, we need to identify, we need to acknowledge and see that these are the skills we need to promote, and this is where we need you to back us up so we can level up this ground, and maybe eventually we will get more goals than Asians and Europeans in the next WorldSkills competition.
Thank you very much, leveling up. And thank you to all speakers, conference participants. Join me in giving a round of applause to the participants here. Unfortunately, we may not be able to take more questions because of time. We have heard that skills development plays a very crucial role in fragile and conflict-affected contexts, and it can help individuals to build their lives, foster economic growth, and contribute to long-term peace and stability. And however, implementing effective skills development programs in these settings require careful consideration of the unique challenges and opportunities as we have heard from this panel. And most importantly, skills gives hope. Once again, join me in appreciating the panel today. And of course, my apologies for not picking up more questions because of time. We can pick it up during the refreshment session. And I invite you to join us for the sessions tomorrow. The program will begin at 9:30 in the plenary hall here with sessions on artificial intelligence and education with representatives from Autodesk, LinkedIn, Festo, and Microsoft. Thank you very much.